I guess the first question is what was surprising from last night? I would say personally, not that much. I thought it actually went pretty much as expected. If you look at a lot of the political reports, 538 Cook, it pretty much aligned with a lot of it. There were a few toss-ups or lean elections that went the other way of the slight tilt. But overall, no huge upsets, I would say.
I would say there's many big upsets. I do think there were some surprises, though. I believe there was a House seat in Oklahoma that flipped that almost no one saw coming. Kendra Horn defeated Steve Russell. That was a surprise. I think as far as polling error, Florida is always a close election, but Andrew Gillum, who was a Democrat, led in almost every public poll after the primary, and he still came up short about 1% in the final result. Same for Bill Nelson. That was probably the biggest senatorial surprise. There were a lot of red state senators who that are Democrats who ended up underperforming their polls, but perhaps that was just, that was anticipated by most of pundits, and it was kind of seen as, they were in trouble. So that was probably not too much of a surprise. Some seats, I was surprised to see the margins on them were so small or so large. For example, in Kansas, the Democrat defeated Chris Kobach overwhelmingly, over 50%, and it was supposed to be, I think 538 had an exact tie before that. So surprises up and down, nothing out of the ordinary, but it will shake out Washington, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the Tester election was a lot closer, although it looks like he's pulling that out.
He's done that before.
Yeah. And I think the margin also on the Braun-Donnelly election might have been a bit stronger in favor of Braun than a lot of people might have expected.
That was the first surprise of the night. Indiana is usually the first state that polls close, and I think that kind of set an ominous tone for red state Democrats last night.
Definitely, and also you mentioned Gillum. I think there was kind of an unexpected downfall for black progressives. Both him and Abrams in Georgia did not do as well as a lot of people thought they would. So what did you see any patterns regarding different demographics, race, gender, and age? I mean, I would say in terms of gender, we had both more women candidates and more women voters. And in terms of age, a lot of young adult turnout. But it wasn't enough to counter the Republican turnout in a way that would really lead to a blue tsunami, as people were calling it.
Right. I do think that there could have been, like you said, a bigger blue tsunami had Republicans not done. I mean, the Republicans turned out, we'll know exactly turnout numbers in the next coming days, but this could have been a much worse night for Republicans. This was, if anything, it was pretty tame compared to some of the blue wave scenarios. As far as demographics goes, I think women are some of the real victors of last night. A lot of the suburban districts that we've seen flip have had women candidates. A lot of these areas are suburban women, suburban white women, particularly, and suburban women of color, who have kind of coalesced, and these are in areas that perhaps voted for Mitt Romney in 2012 over Obama and have now kind of shifted to Hillary Clinton in 2016. We're seeing that trend continue, and that helped flip quite a few House seats last night. Young people, I don't know the exact numbers yet, I don't know if anyone does, but from what I think exit polls showed and what polls showed before, is millennial turnout was much higher than previous midterms, but there is still kind of that counterweight from older people, and that while younger people do vote more progressive, there is still a shift of this white working class male that has dominated and is becoming more Republican as the years go on.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a lot of, you mentioned the Romney-Clinton districts, yes. And I think there's a lot of suspicion that the Obama-Trump districts would really go Democrat and go in a very populist Democrat direction, and we didn't really see that. And yeah, regarding gender, I think the number is we're looking at over 100 new representatives who are women, which is really impressive.
Very cool.
Yeah. And now some of the big issues that I think really affected the Republican turnout, I would say the appointment of Justice Kavanaugh was one of the big things that solidified the Republican support. I think the Democrats that were affected and polarized by it may have already been planning on voting Democrat, and I don't know how much that influenced their turnout, but I would say we definitely saw an increase in approval for Trump after the Kavanaugh appointment. And as a result, I think that is one of the reasons that the blue wave was not as strong as it possibly could have been.
It definitely put a lot of red state Democrats in the Senate in kind of a bind. I think that would have been, we had a handful who voted for Justice Gorsuch and against Justice Kavanaugh, and they try to downplay it as, we pick who's best for the country, but for a lot of those states and those voters who support Trump and see that as kind of a binary choice, that wasn't enough. And I think while Kavanaugh perhaps may have had an opposite effect for women and younger voters as being a mobilizer, that doesn't quite balance out in terms of the Senate. There are more people who are negatively affected by the Kavanaugh hearings and such that are in less, beneficial states for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that, and I would add, looking at social and economic issues, I think leading up to the midterms, Trump strategically focused on social issues, or issues that are typically regarded as social issues, like the Supreme Court and like immigration regarding the caravan. And I would argue that Democrats are really winning on economic issues in large part. I think Trump's tariffs have been unpopular. I think a lot of his health initiatives have been unpopular. People are realizing the ways that the ACA benefits them, and the GOP attempts to strike it down may not be good for Republican voter turnout. So I think Trump's focus on Kavanaugh, immigration, and other domestic, more social type issues over economic issues might have been one of the reasons that Democrats did not have an extraordinary performance in the House, and they actually did a bit less than they were projected to do in the Senate.
I think Trump is extremely good at winning culture wars. He is, it's what he does best. It's how he won the primary, it's how he won the election in some respects. And there's evidence now that he's able to do it, at least to some extent, provide a victory in the midterms, and that has its benefits and its cost when you make your election about cultural things, about stopping caravans and things that doesn't transfer into policy.
Yeah.
And that ends up being, what have we really accomplished in 4 years? But maybe that's not what people want. Maybe people want to have something to argue about like this, and maybe governing comes second to these elections.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Trump is really underrated in his messaging abilities, and I think credit where credit is due for the GOP, because, with all of the record voter turnout, at least record in near recent history, voter turnout that we've been seeing among especially youth and women voters, and to some extent people of color, the fact that the GOP actually in some ways outshot their projections is really impressive, and you gotta give credit to Trump and the GOP's messaging and campaign tactics.